Good morning. It's Easter morning here in Perth Andover, where I used to be mayor up until 6 years ago. My name is Terry Ritchie. I'm supposed to be doing something else, so of course I'm going to do this diversion first. In 1981, in the early spring, I was living by myself in an apartment near the old Forum down in Montreal. And I found myself alone for the first time in my life, something I'd always been aiming for. When I lived here in Perth Andover, we'd go for long, lonely walks with 7 or 8 people. It's always like that. Um, the last friend I had in Montreal was an Englishman who came over from England with me. And as he was leaving, he said, when the whole world is upside down, when everyone's in turmoil, people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. He said, there's no one else I'd rather be with. I thought, wow, he just compared me with Winston Churchill, my hero. But as he's going out the door, he added, it's just the other 97% of the time that you're so fucking useless. And I waited till he was out of sight, out of hearing before I laughed. You shouldn't encourage such truths. And a little later, I decided, well, my whole act is clean. My family's 400 miles in each direction, east and west. And I don't know anybody in Montreal for once. I don't want to, especially, and don't want to not know. My whole life was clean, no love affairs, no friendships. And I thought I might as well clean up my apartment too. So I threw out everything that I'd been buying or people been giving me and collecting over the months, the things that you think I should read this or I should do this, I should have this, and you don't really need it. So I threw out all kinds of furniture I didn't want. So I ended up with one chair, one table, and one coffee table in case to writing on, in case I wanted to sit on the cushion and write on the coffee table or use it as a footstool. It was all practical things like that. I threw out the bad Hemingway, kept the good Hemingway, threw out the bad Shakespeare, which, believe it or not, some of it strikes me as very bad, and it's good. And I kept the King James Bible, but everything else just turfed. I ended up with those student kind of bookshelves. You end up with stolen boards and bricks, and no books sitting on them. But I ended up with a very clean apartment. And I had just had one stuffed chair. And I was sitting in that chair thinking, why didn't I do this before? Look at it. It's plain hardwood floors, brick walls. This is the way to live. It's just simple, clean, neat. And I was just thinking that when suddenly in the far corner of the room, honest to God, this actually happened. Pope John Paul II appeared in St. Peter's Square in all his robes with blood dripping from his hands. And that was an amazing enough sight, but the sight that followed it was more unbelievable than that one. The next scene was me standing in a very, very crowded room, about 400 or 500 people. All the lights are out, and the spotlight's on me. Anyone who knows me knows that would never happen. I always sat at the back of the class. I always hated to be the center. I never understood the passion for attention, because it seems to me the world is to be looked at, or even reading and writing. You want the light to shine over your shoulder, not in your face. And that's pretty much been my attitude all along. Ironically, when I became mayor, I had to give 75 radio and television interviews in the first 5 months. What an ordeal. Anyway, for this time, this is 1981, remember, spring of 1981. There I was standing in the spotlight, and you will say these 5 things. And remember, the first one was the child of God walks the earth again with the footsteps of a child of man. But the second one was the Antichrist is already in Rome. And I said, I don't talk like that. I never use the phrase Antichrist. And I started rewording. There are 3 other things. And I started rewording them, and then the voice goes, no. And then you go back to the Pope, St. Peter's Square with blood dripping from his hands. it never occurred to me that he would be shot. I just thought it's symbolic, like all big public officials. He has blood on his hands. That's what I assumed. Yeah, but that wasn't for me to assume. It was just to see it. And then I would go back and see me standing in that crowded room, spotlight on me, and I say these 5 things. And that happened almost every night, or sometimes twice, 2, 3 times a night. And then I started asking for signs. I'm not going to do this unless there were some signs. And boy, did I get signs. And almost all of them had to do with Cross, including the suicide of a young man in London, Timothy Cross. And on the way to the inquest, I noticed all the signs along Haymarket, where they normally say walk or have a picture of a man walking, always a man walking, you notice, in those days. Instead, there would be these white signs say cross, cross, cross. And then we go for a walk and then end up totally inadvertently right below the big cross on top of Mount Royal. Or I'd go out to write a poem and then think, well, I walked out without paper or pen, and then walk along Sherbrooke. I remember a glint of gold in the gutter, and I go back and pick it up. It's a roll gold cross pen. One of those expensive but nice working little item. It's always like that, always. Even when I decided I'd have enough of these, the signs kept getting heavier and heavier. I hate to even admit I still ask for them when it involved deaths, but I did. Thought, why would I do that? If I say those 5 things, and even I would camp out on my own doorstep if somebody said those things and they came true, and I couldn't live with that. So then one Friday night, just as I was about to go out, I used to go dancing for 4 or 5 hours a night, different clubs, because I didn't know anybody. At first I danced like a broken windmill or a drunken sailor. But then when I realized I don't know anybody, I'm not trying to impress anybody, don't want to meet anybody. I value my freedom too much. I used to keep a bathtub full of ice cold water, sometimes put ice cubes in it. But I just loved dancing places where nobody knew me. I didn't want to know anybody. I didn't want to not know anybody. I just wanted to be free. That worked right up until my girlfriend from the past came and visited, and I took her around to some of those clubs. After that, they were off limits because women hate women. They see you with another woman, holy crumbs, wouldn't leave you alone. They'd leave you alone before, but when they see you've got somebody, it's just ironic and perverse, I think. But my favorite club was a gay club because the floor was plexiglass. It was easy. You could dance for hours and you wouldn't get shin splints or pains of any kind. The music was good. The sound effects were good. And I didn't know anybody. And besides, I looked like a cop in those days. I was trim, muscular, clean shaven. And I looked like the kind of person I approach you, not you approach me. So that was my defense thing. But it became so, I would call it charismatic dancing. Like you can move with the music so beautifully. I call it like flying like an eagle on legs of silk, like dangling on the earth. It was just a wonderful feeling. I had to exercise every day to counteract the muscles I use repeatedly from dancing. But before I was about to go to that club that Friday night, a girl, remember all these signs, Christ, cross, a girl from 100 Mile House of all places, but 2,000-3,000 miles away, phoned out of the blue. I met her in London once. That Englishman I told you about walked out the door is her sister. She phoned for him. She didn't know he'd long gone. And she phoned, her name is Christine. I made that connection after only 2 years. I'm that swift. But I told her the whole thing. I told her all 5 things. I told her the whole story. But I had a whole bunch of bull about the Pope with blood in his hands that was totally irrelevant. Remember, I was just shown these things and not the very thing. I remember one night when I was watching the Pope standing in St. Peter's Square, I suddenly said, fall over. And it fell over like this, like a poster falling off a wall. He didn't fall within the picture. The whole thing fell. um, that's about as much control as I had over any of those scenes. But I told her the whole thing, and then I said, if it doesn't happen tonight, I'm not going to go through with it because I had enough of this. It's getting too heavy. It's it's even involved death. I don't want to go on with this any longer. It's got to be tonight or not at all. And sure enough, that night, around 3 o'clock, suddenly all the lights went out in this club. The place was unusually packed. I thought maybe the fire marshal was closing it down, and I found myself right in the center of the stage, which is already crowded. And I thought, oh, not now. So I kept moving until I was just about to step off the side of the stage onto the floor. When all the lights went out, the emergency lights went on, but one of the emergency lights that's supposed to be shining on a rear exit way at the back of the room was aimed at the ceiling instead. And this tall guy comes striding by, and he just reached up and punched it. And instead of falling on the door in the other direction, it fell on me. The light fell right on me. There I was standing with my t-shirt, my body glistening with sweat, in perfect shape because I've been living on dandelion greens and brown rice and one bottle of wine a month, and getting lots of exercise, of course. But I stood there in that light with the spotlight on me, exactly like in that scene. And I looked down and I thought, wow, I've never looked this good in all my life. When you're, what was I then, 36? You take all the compliments you can give yourself. I guess I was 35 at that point. That was Friday night. That Sunday, the Pope was, as everyone knows, on the 13th, was shot in Rome. It never occurred to me about him being shot. But it was exactly the scene I saw. Other than that, anyway, that wasn't the first kind of incident. I'd been seeing plane crashes for many years by then. Several of them were really horrific, and usually you're right inside the plane. And there's only one plane crash where a voice spoke to me, and that was where the plane didn't look like it had crashed. So I said, there's nothing wrong. And the scene was closing up like an iris, like in the old-fashioned movie when they do the camera iris thing. And I said, no, there's nothing wrong. So the iris opened and showed the plane was flying along level above semi-desert terrain, looked like semi-arid, about like you'd see around Kamloops. And I could see the color of the livery of the plane, blue and green. And it was flying level. There's nothing, no flames or smoke or anything coming from it. But something was wrong because, first of all, I wouldn't be seeing it unless something was wrong. So the iris started closing up again. And I said, no, I still don't see it, although I knew something was there. I'd seen something, I just hadn't registered it. So we flew straight at the plane, over the top, along the side, and then over the back. You could look right down at the Rolls-Royce engines. I think there's 3 of them there in the configuration. You can see the sunlight glinting on the cowling of the Rolls-Royce logo. It was just very, very plain clear. And then you pulled right out on the other side, which really was the side to start out on. But then I said the same thing. Although now I could see every window was black. When there was a white curtain down, you should be seeing white. But the way the sun was, you should have been looking right through the cabinets and sunlight. And there wasn't anything. Everything was dark. And I said, well, I still don't see it. And then we started zooming right into the door, right forward of one of the wings. And this is the only time a voice spoke to me in one of these dreams. And the voice said, do you really want to be there when they open the door? And the way he said it, I thought, oh, no, I don't. So we backed out, flew back, just reversed the whole trip, flew back over the engines and out the other side, and then the iris closed and I just accepted this is a very tragic plane crash. And it happened within 10 days in Riyadh. The plane was flying pilgrims back from Mecca, but the pilots were Canadian. The plane flew along and then cleared Mayday and landed, and then just sat perfectly still on the tarmac. It didn't taxi into position, it just stayed where it landed. And the tower couldn't communicate. So they rushed out to see what was wrong. And as soon as they opened the door, the whole thing went up in flames. And then the helicopter, which I never even knew such things existed, a firefighting helicopter, and it flew over the plane, over the very same pattern I did. In that, you'd call it a dream. I think it's like they're more like visions. Anyway, the Pope in my living room when I just cleaned up my whole life and act. That was kind of the pinnacle of an offense against my desire for an ordinary life. And I've done this thing, I'm talking about this because I have to do something now that I really don't want to do, but it's 25 years overdue. And I've just got word that I'm to do it right away as a matter of urgency. So stand by. I hope I won't have to do it, but I don't see how I can get out of it. 25 years is a long enough delay, and I hope you'll forgive me, some of you, when you hear what I have to say, that I waited so long and gave you so little to go on all that time. It concerned the death of Princess Diana, and that was worse. Night of my life.